Welcome back to Insight, the podcast that looks beyond data and AI into the real world. In the first series, we learnt all about Insight, the new data hub for eye health, where eye health for all over the UK is stored and made available for research. In the next 3 episodes, we'll bring together comedians and mathematicians to reveal just how embedded algorithms and artificial intelligence already are in our everyday lives, from smart cities to online dating, and whether machines can be biased. This series will explore all of this and more through prisms of visual impairments. I'm Dr Amit Patel, and in this episode, we'll be exploring smart living. How much do we already rely on big data and algorithms without knowing it? As a visually impaired person myself, I use technology every day, and we're going to look at some of the latest technology for VIPs that may have uses for all others. With my guests, we're going to explore how does data-based technology learn what we want, and how personal is personalisation. Before I introduce my guests, let me introduce myself. I'm Dr Amit Patel, a medical doctor, and I specialised in emergency medicine until 2013 when I lost my sight overnight due to keratoconus. Now I'm registered severely sight impaired and I'm completely blind. After being registered blind, I had to learn to navigate and operate in a world without vision. And once I got to grips with the basics, I set out to help others who were new to sight loss. I'm now an active campaigner for accessibility, diversity and inclusion, but I don't do this alone. I have a beautiful Labrador guide dog called Kika who's always by my side, and it's Kika who was the inspiration for my first book, Kika and Me. With us, and Kika today, I have presenter, writer, comedian Timandra Harkness and Fraser Fleming. Fraser is the chairman of Triple Tap Tech, a great charity he set up to provide advice, help and support training on technology to VI communities. And like myself, he's visually impaired. Tamara, before we really get into this, can you explain to me, what is big data?
Start with the small questions. Well, when I started looking into this, which is quite a few years ago now, and it was a bit of a buzzword, I was a bit skeptical. I thought, are we just talking about lots of data, basically? Are we just talking about there is more data than ever before because we have more technology to collect it? But then I did work out that actually there is a bit more to it than that. And in fact, I managed to make a backronym, like an acronym, but you reverse engineer it to get the word that you wanted. So I managed to turn data into an acronym because it is big. There is loads and loads of data out there, but it's also, it's got lots of dimensions. So, or if you prefer for the D, it's got different databases and you can plug them together. So you can plug together, for example, a patient's brain scans, their medical records, the postcodes where they lived, and the weather reports from those postcodes. And this was Professor Paul Matthews, who's a neuroscientist, explained this to me, that you can then get a multi-dimensional picture of each patient, which allows you to ask new questions of the data that the people collecting the data had not thought of. So in his case, he wanted to know, is there a relationship between the hours of sunshine that you get, so possibly vitamin D, and the progress of your multiple sclerosis? And he thought that there was. So it's got different dimensions. It's collected automatically. As I'm sure we'll go on to hear, it's almost everything we do now generates data. It's got the element of time because we collect data almost in real time. That means you can make a time series and project it into the future. So you can look at patterns from the past and say, if this continues, we can foresee that this would happen in the future. And then the last A is for AI, which I think we'll come on to, because a lot of the algorithms that we use to make sense of the data rely on what is broadly called artificial intelligence. I mean, whether it's intelligence in the sense that a human is that can think is another question which we can dig into later on. But so that's what I would say is big data is there's a lot of data, but also you can put it together. You can put together different data sets to get a multidimensional picture. You collect it automatically. It's got an element of time, and we use AI to process it.
Amazing. But when it comes to data, what's more important, the amount of the size of data or how it's used? Because I guess you can have a lot of data, and it kind of just becomes overwhelming and it gets complicated. Is it so much that it's all about the right type of data, or just collaborating everything and kind of putting it together and getting a formula at the end of it?
Well, no, I think you're right. I mean, I called my book rather frivolously. I called it "Big Data: Does Size Matter?"
And I love that.
Uh,
That is something I would pick up and read, regardless if it interested me or not. But it's just, you hit the nail on the head with that. That was amazing.
Oh, good. Well, that was the idea, was to say to people, look, this is not going to be a very hard work book with loads of equations in. But it's also, the implicit answer is, it's what you do with it that counts. And I really think that's true. But obviously, there are a lot of things that I think the sheer scale of the data makes things possible that would not otherwise be possible. And certainly, if you look at machine learning, a lot of that relies on having immense amounts of data so that the computer program can start to pull out patterns that are only really visible if you have a lot of input. But a lot of it does come down to things like what Professor Paul Matthews told me about, where you can put together different types of data. I mean, he actually said to me, I said, are you very excited having lots of brain scans because there's lots of data there? And he said, no, not really. That's just large data. Big data is when you get these different things and put them together and ask a new question. So I think that is just as important. I think the ability to put together different data sets and analyze them is just as important as having lots of data in the first place.
People talk of data being used to personalize our experience, offering us what we might want to buy or watch or listen to based on our previous choices. But how personal are these suggestions really? Timandra, is it something you can kind of help fill in?
Well, in many ways, it's not that personal. It's personal in the sense that it's targeted to you, but the information that lies behind the algorithm deciding that you would be interested in buying this thing, or that you want information on this thing, or even that your habits are these and that therefore you should worry about this medical thing, actually comes from the data from lots of other people, millions of other people in some cases. So in a way, it's the least personal thing possible, because they're just slotting you into a massive, massive matrix of other people and saying, where do you come on all these axes? Okay, well, that's you. And of course, there's a couple of things wrong with this. One is that usually the databases are not as complete as they would like to think. So, for example, famously, a lot of databases leave out people who are not part of the Silicon Valley tribe that generates these ideas. So it's not just about designing things, but maybe the faces they put in or the voices, so on, are not there. And Fraser, you must know the video of the two Scotsmen in the lift, the voice recognition failing to recognise them asking for numbers, because clearly it's not been trained in any Scottish voices. And there's lots of examples of this. But there's actually more subtle things. Like the example I always like to use is there's an app called Strava, which cyclists and runners like to use. And they have lots of data from people who go cycling all over the world. So some city planners have gone, well, this is brilliant, because we can get the data off Strava and we can see where in our city people go cycling. And then we can use that to know where we should put in cycle paths. But of course, what they miss there is that not everybody who ever gets on a bicycle uses Strava. It tends to be the really fit, keen people who wear Lycra. So what you're basically doing is putting in cycle paths where the really fit, confident people already cycle, and not cycle paths that people like me, who are too scared to ride on city roads, would ride if there was a cycle path. So it's that thing of you get a bit bamboozled by the fact that it's big data. You think, oh, we've got all the information from everybody, but you haven't. I mean, if you take information from Fitbits, for example, not everybody has a Fitbit. They tend to be targeted on certain, definitely richer demographics. There's even, if you look overall, there are even ethnic differences between the different types of devices that people favour. So you could easily get a really, really skewed picture of the population just by not being aware of what the gaps are in your data. So I think that's one problem. And the other problem, of course, is that it's really even though it may have many dimensions in the statistical sense, it's never going to look at you from the inside. So it doesn't really understand what makes you tick. It just gathers the data and uses a probability to say, well, of previous people who displayed these habits and we collected this data from, 80% of them were like this. So we're going to assume there's an 80% chance that you're like this. But it's only a probability prediction. There's not actually any causal guarantee that you will really be like all those other people.
One of the things that I remember sort of going back at probably about 5 or 6 years ago now was when sort of the fitness trackers that first came out. People sort of used to wear them all the time, but they were wearing them in sort of locations, so it's maybe in restricted locations such as army bases and that, and they were doing sort of their exercise routine around the army base. But the data companies were actually able to figure out through the sort of the fitness data that they were getting whereabouts these bases were and sort of their routines. So they actually had to stop using them in order to keep sort of with keep up to date. To keep sort of the area secure.
Yeah, I remember that, and there were bases that weren't even on the maps because they were so secure and sensitive. But if you looked at the fitness things, there's a perimeter map effectively where people had done the running.
Definitely, there's a nice wee map going around the border of it. So
if you have a lot of data, then you are less likely to come up with some completely random predictions because things tend to average out. The important thing to be aware of is just to go, okay, well, we have all this data and this is great. What are the gaps? What are the demographics, for example, that we're not in contact with? And can we either try and include them in some way or just in some way recognize that our data may be skewed slightly and compensate for that in some mathematical way? There's always, I think, a need to go, okay, well, let's cast the net as widely as we can in terms of gathering information, but then also use your human nous and intuition to go, okay, but look, I can see that the people we're not getting to are these people, so let's factor that in when we apply our human minds to the insights that we want to get from the data.
Fraser, what do you think is an algorithm?
So for me, algorithm is a program that's able to sort through a sort of vast amount of data in order to give you a response back to what you're needing. So probably the good example of that would be using one of the smart speakers. You ask it a question that will then use algorithms to sort through its database in order to give you a response back to that question.
Timandra, what do you think is an algorithm?
Well, obviously, at its simplest, an algorithm is just a program, a list of ordered instructions for a computer, or you could even talk about an algorithm for a human being as just a list of ordered instructions with if-then questions. So you get up in the morning, if you have your socks on, you can put your trousers on. If you don't have your socks on, put your socks on first, that kind of thing. But when we talk about algorithms now, we tend to mean something more particular. We tend to mean a computer program that's sophisticated enough that you don't have to spell out every stage of a process, which is really talk about machine learning or AI. We tend to talk about things that we give it information about what outcomes we want, so what the job we want it to do is, and we give it a lot of data, and then we let the algorithm work out the best way to get the answers. So when we talk about, for example, the unpleasantness over the A-level result algorithm, the problem with that was that people didn't really understand what was the process that had gone into feeding in lots of data, as it turned out, from the previous 3 years, not particularly from the students now. And then you get these results which do apply to the students now. And one of the reasons that went so wrong was that people didn't understand the process, and they particularly didn't realise until it hit them that the algorithm was based on previous data from other people and not from the work that they'd done themselves.
I think also with the ORCAM, it's important to note that you're in control of the data that it stores. So it only sort of recognises people that you've asked it to recognise. and sort of will only scan text or that you've sort of asked it to sort of scan. So it's not like if you're in a museum and you're maybe walking past all the lovely exhibitions, it will read out everything to you there. You need to give it a specific command in order to get it to read the text.
That's brilliant. Fraser, as a fellow VI, you can appreciate just how much technology plays a huge part in probably our everyday living. Have you kind of noticed an improvement in tech? You work with tech every day. It's something you do. Have you noticed a difference in just technology getting better because maybe the data is available, or just the fact that data, tech is out there and it's constantly revolving. It's kind of getting bigger and bigger, and manufacturers are now kind of having to put accessibility into things and thinking about it, and it's more accessible for us, I guess. Is there something that, is there something that you've noticed is just becoming easier, or is it becoming a little bit harder?
Well, definitely. I think over sort of the past 10 years, with sort of the advent of smart speakers in particular, sort of artificial intelligence and data coming together in sort of one source where you can get all your sort of daily information sort of through your speaker with just sort of asking it, what am I doing today? So that's sort of a really good step forward. But also sort of data sort of included in everything that we do. So with your smartphone, will be sort of gathering data from you, maybe getting what you're being received or what you're sending in messages, what you emails and that you're doing, and it can collate all that information and respond back to you as needed. So I think sort of data is does play a major role in sort of everyday living, especially from visual impairment. Another thing that I think where data can come into its own, and especially big data, is when it comes to sort of bespoke devices that have been developed specifically for visual impairment. So devices such as, say, the OrCam or Envision glasses, which will actually take sort of simple sort of text data on that and transfer them into an audio source for you. And they've also got the ability to sort of recognise people's face in that. So stuff is sort of really coming together. And I think the more the technology is moving on, the more better and more easier and more importantly, more accessible it is going to be for people with visual impairment.
Absolutely. I'm a big fan of tech. On my desk here, I've got a device that will read just a simple document to me. I've got a brow printer. I've got the OrCam. And for those who don't know what an OrCam is, it's this tiny. To me, it reminds me of a USB stick that sticks to a side of your glasses. And this works, basically, it's got a camera at the front and a speaker at the back, and it will scan your surroundings. It can read documents if you put a document in front of it. It can, as you say, recognize faces, and all of this without having to be connected to an internet connection, without having data fed into it. And it's just incredible how much all of this has been developed, because when you think about it, right from the beginning, it was Google with their Google glasses that came out, and that wasn't targeted to visually impaired people. That was just targeted to people to make lives easier. And it's other companies who have started getting that data, putting it all together and making it work for visually impaired people and making their lives so much more independent. And for me, that's absolutely amazing. And that could only be done with a collaboration of data. And I love that. And like you say, smart speakers, they're made for the masses. They're not made for any particular disabilities. But for me, we have one in every room. And I don't know if you're like this, but it will tend to read out the news for me. It will give me the weather report. I can control the lights with it, which doesn't make any difference to me, but it does to the rest of my family. But it's things that aren't specifically made for the disabled community. It's something that works for everybody, but it works in cohesion with people with disability. And I like that. I like the fact that people think about that right from the beginning if they're going to make something.
I've got a funny story that I can tell you about when we first got smart light bulbs in the house. When we first got a smart light bulb, I installed that into my son's room when he was at school. So my youngest son, that is, he came back from school and I thought, okay, we're going to have a wee bit of fun now. So he went upstairs to his room, and downstairs in my living room, I went, turn on the sun, is what I called it. So it turned this light on in the room. I waited a couple more minutes and I went, turn off the sun, and it turned it off. I then waited a few more minutes again and started repeating the process, changing the colour of the light bulb. So within the space of about 20 minutes, I hear him coming down the stairs. And he goes, "Dad, I don't want to alarm you, but I think we're haunted."
That's amazing. It's amazing, isn't it? It's how kids see it. Okay, so Timandra, is there something you want to bring into talking about data? I love the quote you say. You think of data as being like bones. You can tell a lot about someone from their bones, but not who they are. I kind of want to bring that in. That's for me. You know, as a doctor, that just kind of sits really, really close to me.
Yeah, well, actually, I mean, I was just thinking as you were talking about tech and how tech that's just designed for everybody can have particular uses for people. And I was reminded of the introduction of SMS, of text messages, which were, I mean, I don't think the phone companies even thought most people would use them. I think they just stuck them in as an extra. It's like, oh, well, you know, and you can also send short text messages if you really want to. But of course, for deaf people, that was absolutely transformative because they could now carry around their phone and they could text anybody and anybody could text them back. And they're interacting completely normally, just like everybody else. They don't need a special technology to translate text into type, which was, you know, what happened before. There was literally a person who would listen to a phone call and then type and then speak aloud the incoming typing. But no, deaf people could just text each other. And so it opened up a complete world of just very informal, easy interaction. And then listening to you talking about all the smart speakers and so on, I'm thinking, yeah, it's the same. It's not particularly designed for a particular need, but we're quite good, I think, at saying, oh, I can use that for this. And we adapt it for ourselves. And then I think quite often the tech companies, I mean, not you, Fraser, obviously, but often the big tech companies lag behind. They go, oh, people are using it for this. Well, that's probably good. In fact, we could probably tweak that, make it better, but we hadn't thought of it ourselves, which maybe is a sign that we need more people like you and Fraser in at the design stage.
I think what you're talking about there, probably one sort of very good example is when it comes to accessible gaming. So there was a company called Naughty Dog who made a game called The Last of Us. They decided to make a sequel to that game on the PlayStation 4 called The Last of Us Part 2. So they actually included people with different disabilities to come in and help in the design process of the game. So it's actually turned out now that The Last of Us Part 2 is one of the most accessible games that you can get at the moment.
That's
so
brilliant.
With including people with sort of disabilities in the initial design process, it opens up a whole world for sort of people to access it. But also from a sort of business point of view, it opens up another marketing stream that they can introduce the product to, and it's sort of a sort of hidden income that they can get access to.
Yeah, I'm a big believer that, you know, if you're going to put tech out there, it should be available to everybody, not just to the few. And the thing is that when you get specific tech designed for the visually impaired, you have to add a couple of zeros at the end of that price bracket because it costs so much money. You know, you're talking about thousands of pounds. I've got a little keyboard sat in front of me that all it does is little pop up little dots, so just so I can read it in braille. And you're looking at £3,000-4,000 just for this small little device, where you can buy a tablet that can do pretty much everything for £300-400. And this is the problem, you know, sometimes tech is out of the reach of disabled people because it's never really thought about in the mainstream. So you kind of get left behind sometimes. But you know, hopefully, you know, now I think companies are thinking about it, and I think with also all of this data out there and all the designs, and you know, just the fact that they're actually talking to disabled people before they design it, it's making everything accessible.
And of course, it can go the other way because, as you were describing, these glasses that can scan the surroundings and recognize faces, I was actually thinking, because I am really terrible at people's names. I've always been like it. I don't know what it is. There's some fault in my memory. Obviously, I've always been. People I know for years and years, I will look at them and just forget their names. So when you're saying this, I'm thinking, oh, my word, I could have glasses that would just scan. And whenever I see somebody I know, it would just whisper in my ear, Dave, his name's Dave. and then I would know. So I would actually, I would pay for that, especially if it's not connected to the internet. So I know that I'm not subjecting Dave to being part of someone else's database.
Oh no, this is it. I think a lot of the tech is you have to be connected to some form of data link. You need a feed, you need a Wi-Fi signal, you need a GPS, you need something to be able to recognize it. These new devices now are amazing, and I have a funny story actually about it. The Orcam actually has gestures where you can do things in front of your hands. You use your hands to kind of make gestures, and it will recognize it and either run a program or do something. And there's this great gesture where you just put your wrist up against in front of you, like you're having a look at a time on your watch. You don't have to have a watch on or anything. You just do the gesture, and the Orcam will actually tell you what the time is. It'll kind of whisper it in your ear. And doing in public with people watching you and blatantly not having your watch on, and you and someone will say, "Oh, what's the time?" You do this gesture, and you say, "Oh, it's 1:15." How did you do that? How it's the magic that these blind people have. The ability to see time just in thin air. But it's that's what it is. It kind of puts it for me. Gadgets like that, technology like that, kind of gives me my freedom back. It gives me my confidence, my independence. You make a joke out of it, but it's these small, tiny things, and all of this wouldn't happen if it wasn't for companies kind of getting all this data and being able to put it all together and actually making this possible as a device that actually kind of empowers visually impaired people. Well, the lovely thing with the Orcam is it obviously it wouldn't ever recognize someone it doesn't know. So what you have to do with the Orcam is you stand in front of someone and you basically swipe a finger and ask and say a name, and it will take a photo of that person and then hold it in its memory. So next time that person walks past you, it will recognize them. So again, you feed it data, but you only feed it data once. After that, it's stored.
On a sort of semi-serious note there, was I was supporting a client sort of going back a few years ago, and her major problem was that people were coming to the door and they were asking for donations for certain charities or sort of to sell certain products of that. And because she was totally blind, she obviously didn't have the proper ID or that on her. So her daughter bought her one of the Ring video doorbells. So that's the doorbell. It's got a camera installed on it. So that anytime somebody comes to the door, they press the button and it takes a recording of who's at the door. Now, they hooked that up to the Amazon Echo Show. And what happens is anytime somebody comes to the door and presses the doorbell, their face will appear on the Echo Show. So what she does now is she uses her iPhone. She takes out, she uses an app on it called CNAI, which again has got people recognition on it. And she'll hold that up to the Echo Show. So if it's somebody she knows, it'll say it's Graham, it's Sammy, it's Zach. Or if it's somebody she doesn't know, it'll just come up person at centre off screen. So she just doesn't answer the door. So that's a good way of using different sort of sources, sort of the Ring doorbell, the Alexa and the iPhone, 3 different sources in order to, for sort of personal safety, but also to recognise who's at the door.
Yeah. No, that's it. And again, the Echo Show, the Echo Dots are all made for the mass market. It's, and the Ring doorbell isn't made for visually impaired people. It's available. It's just how you use it and how you can kind of get around obstacles, I guess, we're using different technology. That's absolutely amazing. But have any of you actually, have you ever considered when you're looking at new technologies, just how your data is used? Because as you say, Timandra, we feed in data constantly and it's real time, and things like smart speakers, you're giving it commands, it's learning, it's evolving around you. But are you ever worried just where your data is stored or where it's going or how it's being used?
I do worry about that a lot, and it was interesting. The more I researched it, the more I became more wary. So now, if I'm putting apps on my phone, I will always say, "Oh well, what is the app trying to get access to?" And if the app says, "Hey, why don't you give us access to all your contacts?" I'm like, "No, I don't think you need that for the service that you're offering me." So I am more wary, but at the same time, I think it's not something you can completely opt out of. Well, I mean, you can, but it's like you would end up living like you're in the 19th century. So what's the point? So I do think it's something that as a society we need to really take charge of and say, what are we happy for companies to take off us, and what uses is this data being put to? I think is the other thing. Sometimes we get a bit fixated on what data is being collected and not think about who is using it and how might that affect me. Because so much data in itself is innocuous, but when you put it together with a lot of other stuff, well, not even that much other stuff actually, I think 3 or 4 different kind of data sources, you can put together quite a detailed profile of information about somebody. And then if you want to, you can use that to target them or to exclude them from things. And that's, I think that's where we should put our attention really, is how is this being used, and is this disadvantaging people, and could this affect me personally?
Can sort of see that on sort of smartphones. If you've maybe been using Google or Amazon to search specific shopping items and that, and then you go on to Facebook and you'll get Facebook ads that are directed at what you've been sort of searching for on either Google or Amazon. So again, that's a couple of different sources of data that's being used to target information towards yourself.
That's it. I think we possibly are not as aware as we should be of how much data is collected while we're doing something else. I mean, Facebook, for example, they don't only collect the information about what you do on Facebook. If you've got a Facebook profile, then they will quite often have tracking things on your devices that will tell them what you do when you're not on Facebook, and adds to this profile. In fact, I believe they even have profiles of people who aren't on Facebook, but they build kind of phantom profiles of them, because a lot of people will appear, you might be on Facebook in your friends' photographs or something like that. And I think we tend to assume now that if we're on a website, that website may collect information about what we do on that website. But I think sometimes we're not aware of how much other information is being collected, or maybe that when we're on a website, the website is also making a note of where we are geographically, or what device we are using, or what other devices are on the internet connection that we're using, and details like that, which on a mass scale can tell them things about us. It's like, I mean, famously, if you're using certain types of devices, you'll be offered higher prices for things because they assume that you've got more disposable income, rightly or wrongly.
On sort of the sort of positive aspect of that, one of the things that I've noticed probably over the past 5 years or so is when you sign into a service. So if you maybe sign into iCloud, is probably a good example of that. It will actually tell you, come up an alert if you've got 2-factor notification on, of where the new sign-in is coming from and what device is signed in. So, for instance, if you sign into your iCloud account on a new Windows computer, it'll be able to tell you that you're using Internet Explorer. Internet Explorer's not on anymore, isn't it? So it's Edge or it's, I'm still old school with that. So everything's Internet Explorer. But it'll tell you what sort of browser you've used to sign in, the IP address of that browser, and the near location of where we're signed in. So that can be good, but it's also a wee bit scary that they know exactly what you're using and where you're using that.
Yeah, no, this takes us back to the first series of Insights, where we were talking about data to improve health. It's the collaboration of data, kind of putting it together and sourcing it in a way that actually will help either prevent diseases, will help find cures, will even find links between different conditions. And that very much comes down to that whole personalised medicine. Timandra, can you explain what personalised medicine actually is?
Well, it's, it can mean a lot of different things. Sometimes you're really literally talking about a physical medicine, a drug or something, which has been targeted at maybe your genetic makeup, your lifestyle, the particular conditions that you have. And research has shown that this particular molecule will be 80% effective in people like you, whereas the other drug you might have been offered is only 30% effective. And that's, I guess, the kind of dream, is that at some point we'll go to the doctor and the doctor will say, no drug is probably guaranteed, but we're 95% sure that this one will work for you and the condition that you have. But there is a much broader idea, I think, which is that the collection of data enables a kind of constant feedback and even a nudging to change lifestyle things that you might have that might affect your long-term health outcomes. So, I mean, there are people who already have heart conditions who also already have wearables, and there's various trials going on, I think, in the northwest of England, where they're basically their heart rate and so on is monitored remotely via their wearables, and if a worrying pattern arises, then that can go to their doctor, and their doctor can say, actually, come in and see me because I'm a bit worried about the pattern of your heart rate. But more than that, I think for the general population, there is the idea that when you have health apps on your devices and so on, that they will actively encourage you to do healthy things like, take exercise and, I don't know, drink water, sleep, all the usual things that we're meant to be doing. And that there will be a kind of behaviourist intervention to encourage us to do healthy things and discourage unhealthy things. And in a sense, that is also personalised. But to be honest, I'm more excited about the prospect that you could anonymously collect data and actually do some research and actually say, does this really help? If people get up earlier in the morning and go for a run, if we look at them in 10 years' time, do they actually turn out to be healthier or not?
I have to say, that's one thing, before the lockdown situation and all that, was having an Apple Watch. So every day I was sort of going out my way, sort of walking a wee bit extra, trying to meet all the sort of the challenges that come on it, just to get that wee achievement signal to add to the rest of them. So definitely it's some sort of the sort of technology that can have sort of a positive impact sort of on your behaviour, and then being able to see the results, maybe, as you say, 6 months, a year down the line, of what that sort of little change can sort of bring about. One of the other things when it comes to health, technology and visual impairment is I'm diabetic too. So there's a device, and I forget the name of it now, but what it does is it allows your smartphone to scan your blood glucose. So it's sort of it's a wee patch that you wear on your shoulder. And then what that does is that saves all your blood glucose levels. So obviously you can use voiceover or sort of enhance the screen to see the results from a visual impaired viewpoint. But that will also send the details over to your health professional. And what they can then do is decide if they need to make any changes to your medication in relation to what's been happening with your blood sugar.
See, that's a marvellous thing, isn't it? I know a couple of people have got those, and it's just made their lives so much easier. They don't have to constantly go, do I have to sample my blood before I eat this banana? It's like it's happening continuously. And if there's a problem, the machine alerts them.
And it's all real time. That's the amazing part. It literally is everything. It's this massive data stream that we kind of have floating above our heads constantly, that I dread to think just how much data is above there, just going from back and forth and being collected. But it's all making a difference. And I guess it's how you use the data, isn't it? It's what you use the data for. If it's going to make a change, if it's going to be a big impact. It's just like the vaccines we have, right now for COVID. It's all that data has been collaborated, and then, we've got this amazing vaccine at the end of it. But it doesn't happen overnight. It needs that constant amount of feeding to generate the information that you need. And I guess the more people who input the data, the better the results. And I guess you need it from a wide variety of sources just to make that data more accurate and more usable for everyday living. So that to me is it's incredible. As someone who just sits here using tech all day long, don't really think about just what goes into the tech I use. And kind of take a step back and you think, wow, I could put a piece of paper under this device, which looks like an old-fashioned overhead projector that my headmaster would use at school when I was young, but it can read a document out for me. But, it can't fit in my pocket, but I could pull out my mobile phone and point it at my face and it will describe what I look like. And that's using an algorithm data that's been provided, which it sources, and it comes back, but it's all in real time. And, everything, all technology now is just getting quicker, faster. It's getting smaller. It's getting, I think it's getting accessible. I think that's the thing. That's, it's, as you say, Fraser, you're using devices for healthcare. We've got things that, just play music, but it's learning the type of music we like. I dread to say to my Alexa, play my favorite songs, because it'll probably play Peppa Pig and nursery rhymes and Baby Shark. But that's what it thinks I like, because that's what my kids keep asking for. But I guess it's taking that data and kind of breaking it up and using it for the right things. But absolutely amazing talk. But thank you for coming on, Timandra and Fraser. It was lovely to have you on.
That's a pleasure. It's been really interesting. I've learned loads of things.
Thank you very much for inviting us along. It's been a pleasure talking to the two of you.
And Fraser, you keep doing what you're doing, because I'm a huge fan of yours. You're helping so many people kind of get to grip with tech, because when I lost my sight, I thought I knew how. I still had, would you believe, my BlackBerry about 2 years after I lost my sight, because I knew how to use the QWERTY keyboard. I was so frightened to go and use another piece of tech because I wasn't sure how to use it. But it's people like you who kind of give me the confidence and the ability to kind of live my life the way I want to using tech. So just keep on doing what you're doing.
Would it be okay if I sort of mentioned during the podcast our website at tripletaptech.org, and that's sort of a fantastic resource when it comes to knowledge about technology that helps visual impairment.
Perfect. Well, that's it for today. And don't forget to follow us on Twitter. Our handle is @InsightIHub, and would love to hear your feedback. Today's episode was presented by myself, Amit Patel, with special guest Timandra Harkness and Fraser Fleming.